Kate Milapalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome, returning subscribers. If you're new here, I'm delighted that you somehow, I don't know how, found us. And I hope you enjoy the wide variety of topics that I find interesting, and I hope you do too. Everybody double check your subscriptions to everybody you're subscribed to, because you might not be. Things have gotten kind of odd here in our little world. And how do I say this? We are being marginalized to a large extent, being marginalized. People are not finding us. Even if you're subscribed, you may not be getting the notifications. They keep changing the notifications on people. My things have been changed for people I like to keep track of. So double check all of your subscriptions. Spread the word. I would appreciate it. I would appreciate a little love here to encourage me to keep doing this. So thank you very much for being here. Now we're going to talk about my people, my tribe, my fellow Luddites, the new Luddites. So let's talk about this. I've often claimed I'm a proud Luddite, and people look at me like, is that kind of religious organization? No. What is a Luddite? So it's an eponym. It comes from the name of a person, an alleged person, probably an apocryphal story, but it, tells the tale. Ned Ludd. He was a legendary apprentice who broke 2 stocking frames. Those were knitting machines. He broke them in a rage against the machine, in capital letters. So this was the story, probably allegorical. I'm sure it's based on some truth. Things did happen, as you'll find out. But it's the story of a guy called Ned Ludd who got mad at the machinery and broke it so it couldn't be used. But there's a lot more really to it than that. So let's kind of dig into it. In 1779, a weaver from Anstey, hope I said that right, England, for whatever reason, was being whipped by an overseer, maybe taunted by youths. We don't know the full story. He smashed the knitting machine frame in a fit of passion. There's no evidence that this was a real person, that this was a factual event. But because of local lore amongst factory workers, his name was invoked. Whenever there was sabotage at a factory, they would say, oh, well, Ned Ludd did it. So by 1812, any organized group and factory laborer protesters would be called Luddites, followers of Ned Ludd. In the 18th century, keep in mind how everything old is new again. In the 18th century, labor in the domestic manufacturing field was precarious. A lot of people did craft work at home. There was chronic underemployment when there were factories. Factories would hire a larger workforce than they really needed. So you get hired, you thought you had a job. Once in a while you get called into work. You didn't want to foul that up, but often you wouldn't be used. They'd only use you if they had a boom in manufacturing, like a big order or something. So you couldn't rely on your work. Merchant capitalists who were speculating in the textile industry, they had no incentive to assure stability. It didn't matter to them. There were extreme fluctuations in wages, harvests, raw materials, war. All of this led to instability and periods of labor violence. The textile industry really embraced new tech, as industry often does. It's all about production numbers and the bottom line. So new tech for them were machines that produced textiles faster and cheaper than the hands of the craftspeople. So labor organized sabotage. This is an action by labor to slow production by interfering with machinery or the means of production. Now, the word sabotage is from the French, and it comes from a 19th century action in which French laborers threw their wooden shoes, their sabots, into the machinery in protest. So, sabotage is to throw your shoes, your wooden shoes at the factory machines. And I wrote the observation, this was an early form of slow quitting. They wanted to slow the machines down. Now, were they mad at the machines? What was going on here? These were the earliest mechanical stocking knitting devices that were invented in the late 1500s. And they led to labor protests in the 1600s, and they led to violent resistance, especially in 1768 and again in 1779. Parliament stepped in with the Protection of Stocking Frames Act in 1788. Now, this increased penalties for sabotage. Breaking machinery was one of the few protest tactics available to workers. How else were they going to make an impression? They weren't really mad at the machines. They were mad at the system. This has sometimes been called, sabotage has sometimes been called collective bargaining by right. They were trying to get the attention of the employers. It was really difficult to organize labor because these factories were small and they were scattered around the country. So you couldn't make an impression with one little factory, not so many employees, very far away, no communication, no way to get together, they weren't concentrated. Manufacturing was scattered, and the Luddite movement spread. 1811 to 1817, especially during the Napoleonic Wars, was a very unstable time because manufacturers tried to get around fair labor practices. The political instability, the economy was rattled. Why should we be good to our employees? They're lucky to have a job. Sound familiar? Because of the high cost of the war, the English economy was in terrible shape. There was high unemployment, high inflation. The working class was suppressed by the army. They would call out the army to kill them all, especially the Luddites. They didn't like them. The Luddites organized secretly. They drilled at night on the moors to be prepared to deal with the army. And they targeted specific machines. They had other protests that they did. They did public demonstrations. They had letter writing campaigns to officials. They called for government reform in the parliament. They clashed with the government troops, hence the training on the moors. They sent 12,000 troops to deal with these protesting laborers, more than Wellington used in Portugal in the war in 1808. So you hit them in their pocketbooks, you're going to get a reaction. They called out the army specifically this one time because a mill owner got killed. Lord Byron, now here, this is very interesting. I didn't know this. Lord Byron was a huge advocate for labor. He spoke out in support of the working class against government and manufacturers. In York, the government did mass arrests and show trials, and the results were execution of these laborers or penal transportation. So what does that mean? As a punishment, because you've been adjudicated guilty, you get tossed on a ship with a one-way ticket to someplace like Australia or New Zealand. No offense, Australia, New Zealand, we'd all be signing up at this point. Devil's Island. Deported to essentially detention. Sounding more familiar? Sabotage became a capital crime. So this is the context for the use of the title, the new Luddite. But Luddites were basically guerrilla activists. They were aware of the threat to their quality of life and to their craft by mechanization. And they weren't protesting the machines, they were protesting what the machines meant in their lives. Today, there is a growing movement of people pushing back against big tech. Nate and I were talking about it recently a couple of times. There's the, well, what are they called? Silent reading clubs and the pottery clubs, people trying to get away from technology. Now, that's not labor pushing back, but it's a social reaction against the ubiquity of technology. But now people are defining themselves as Luddites, and they're resisting the omnipresence of AI, smartphones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a move to reclaim autonomy, privacy, and mental health, because it has been proven to have a negative effect on mental health. So this has led to this reaction has led to the creation of the international nonprofit network that started out as one little thing called the New Luddites. They arose from the first New York City teen screen-free club. They wanted to disconnect. They wanted to meet in parks outside in nature. They have analog-only events. They're embracing the flip phone, dumb phone, the MP3 player, and real cameras, leaving the smartphones aside. They're resisting the use of AI and devices in school, work, in art. So there's a growing realization that harm's being done by our addiction to devices and our screen-mediated culture. This is a growing movement to take back control from the screens. So, for example, there's a thing called the Harvard abstinence movement. Not what you think. This is a group that wants to restore the fiber of the human experience by rejecting the ubiquity of devices. There's another youth group. It's called #HalfTheStory. Funny thing, for the longest time I thought that was a pound sign. Little did I know. #HalfTheStory, which runs a social media university. This is a program that teaches teenagers emotional resilience, algorithmic awareness, and healthy digital habits. The New York City group met in the park dressed like gnomes to smash iPads. These are neo-Luddites. They're making a statement. As with the original Luddites, neo-Luddites they're not technophobes. I get accused of that a lot while I do this. So, come on. They're not technophobes per se. They're not anti-progress. That's really not the issue. They're simply aware of the largely ignored by mainstream society harms that are being done by addictions to screens. Their motto is, I hope you can remember this, unplug. In 2022, they founded the Luddite Club, began in New York City. They met in the park to sit and draw or talk or listen to the wind. They have a paper newsletter that they mail out every month, and they're now in 25 cities worldwide. AI, they have seen, has a gender bias and has environmental costs. And it's my opinion that this very much is like society in the large part, and AI is trained or informed by society. So this should be no big surprise. There's a common general attitude, especially of tech embracers, adopters, that consideration of these things is actually a resistance to, they show a resistance to the immediate issues with AI, not to mention declining Okay, so I'm going to list some bad things. There's an ignoring of these things, or if not ignoring, kind of yeah, they're there, but we like the advantages. So let me just list a few of the many issues. Declining reading skills, declining critical thinking, declining attention spans, difficulty with emotional regulation, the foundation of shared basic knowledge is being eroded, creates social isolation, has negative impact on the ability to interact with actual people. And I've heard a lot about this, and I have not had the pleasure of seeing it myself because I don't go out. But apparently you cannot strike up a conversation. You go to a checkout counter, there's a Gen Zer working the counter. They don't say hello, how are you, good morning, good afternoon, what have you got there? Oh, I like this chocolate bar too. No conversation, no hello, no goodbye, no thank you, nice to see you, have a good day. No human interaction. Let me know if you've noticed that. Like I said, I don't go anywhere, so what do I know? Let me know if you've noticed that. Surveillance is a big thing, loss of privacy, loss of social control, and on and on and on. But people who talk about this stuff, who say there are issues with technology, are accused of hindering innovation. The people accusing them are the corporate overlords and the technophiles. To be accused of being a Luddite, it's a conversation ender. What do you say, A true Luddite, in the sense of the word, doesn't hate innovation, doesn't hate progress, doesn't hate technology. Rather, she begs the vital question, is this technology harmful to the common good? And if so, we must challenge it. The original Luddites, who were lace makers, by the way, we didn't mention that. They were skilled artisans, and they had sophisticated understanding of technology, just the actual physicality of lace making. And they understood that these machines were making the lace making easier. That wasn't the problem. It was how they were being treated by the owners. They were being dismissed, not paid as well, not given days off. I mean, the working conditions were bad. All of this added up. They were not against technology. They were against the forms of technology that created lower wages and degraded the working conditions. In a nutshell, we're seeing exactly the same thing today. They were resisting the loss of their craft to machines and the alteration of their lives. They're being forced into factory work. These are craftspeople. They didn't punch a time clock in a factory 12 hours a day or how many hours a day they worked. They were working in cottage style industries. Well, the industrialists won this one. The modern neo-Luddites are similar dissenters. They're not against tech, but some insiders in technology who are also not against tech, they feel discomfort at the pervasive and seemingly uncontrollable growth of AI. They want more equitable and democratic development of technology. They've begun activism, and there's San Francisco coning, for example, of self-driving cars, in which they protested by putting those orange road cones on the hood of the self-driving cars, and the self-driving cars couldn't go because I guess they need an unobstructed view to function. So this didn't harm anything, but it was a clear statement. Another example is the Writers Guild, who went on a 146-day strike. This was the first battle of humans against AI. One op-ed concluded that if you want to know how to fix the problems that we face from AI and other technology, become a Luddite. A growing awareness that technology can be used as a tool, but can also shape our lives, and not with our well-being in mind, if we remain passive. So what do? This is a big debate. Nate and I have this conversation often. We don't entirely agree, but we don't disagree either. Because he's more adamant, that it's inevitable. It's here and it's not going away. I feel like we're capitulating and contributing to our own demise. And there are things that we can do. We can distance ourselves from technology. Now, Rich, right? Coming from somebody making YouTube videos. But I do not use a computer for anything else at all. I don't spend all my time on my phone. Now, I'm not any kind of saint of the neo-Luddite movement. I'm not implying that. I'm just saying, I intentionally don't have a car with a computer in it. It's a little older. I do not engage in anything that requires me voluntarily to interact with devices. I won't even go online, your medical records online. I think that's outrageous. Oh yeah, they're private. I don't contribute. Every time I go to the doctor, I get a flurry of emails afterwards. Sign up for our thing, and I just ignore it until they give up in disgust. Reevaluate your relationship with technology. See the ways in which you can disconnect. For example, write a letter with a pen and a paper, put it in the mail. Do a critical examination of technology in society. Make yourself aware of what's going on. Lack of privacy. You can't go anywhere that you're not, surveilled. Make it your business to find out what's going on at Walmart. Now, you may not shop at Walmart. That's fine. I'm not advocating shopping at Walmart. I wouldn't either if I had a choice. But look at what they're doing with this digital pricing and surveillance. They're using facial recognition. They're coming with carts that have a device on it. When that happens, I'll never go into Walmart again. Of course, I haven't in a very long time. I send my emissary. Create unplugged space for learning and entertainment. Read a book. This helps to see how technology has shaped our behavior and conditioned us. Luddism enables critical reflection on the world that we're already allowing to be created around us. Imagine how technology could be used differently for the betterment of society. It reveals to us how it is used against us, and we need a middle ground. Jobs are being lost. You try to interact with a human being, and you only interact with AI or a computer voice or a programmed answering thing. There has to be a better way. Tech utopians against doomsayers. This is not what we're talking about. Not at all. It's far more nuanced. We have to acknowledge the potential benefits and critically assess the real world affects. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, here's a perfect example. I get a paper newspaper, and at least once a month, often more frequently, the guy who delivers it will just not bother to come on Sunday. And Sunday is my favorite paper because it's got a big crossword puzzle and it's got the book section, and it just doesn't bother. And if we don't complain, they just will refund the money. If we don't complain, nothing happens. If I call and complain, their immediate response is, and it's always an AI program, and I lie to it so that I can get talking to a human being. And then it's always somebody across the ocean in a call center, not somebody local that cares or understands. And they have a written script that they follow. And if you interrupt it, they go back to the top and start all over again. And I'll say, we didn't get our paper on Sunday. And the immediate response, before I even have a chance to take a breath, is, oh, we will reimburse you for that. Is that all? Are we done? And I always say, no, I don't want money for it. I want a copy of the Sunday paper. I have to insist. And then I have to say, this happens too regularly. I'm calling you a couple of times a month. You always say exactly the same thing. Nothing ever changes. And then she says exactly the same thing, and nothing ever changes. This is the world we live in. It's called communication, but there's nothing being communicated. So we have to remember that tech advances may be miraculous, but meaningless if the miracle is reserved for a few. And I think this is my biggest argument. I don't like the impersonal part of it, but my biggest argument is, yes, there will be big advances. There will be medical advances that'll boggle your mind. Tech advances already are being applied in the business world. Who has benefited? Not the workers. They've all lost their jobs. Not the workers. And the patients, the ordinary people, we will benefit because we won't be able to afford these tech advances in the medical field. They'll be reserved for the wealthy. So they're also not miraculous if the negative effects are ignored. So that's my rant for the day, and I am curious to see how people respond. But once again, let me make it clear, I'm not against progress. I understand that technological advancements are inevitable. That's how human beings work. But I would say that it's driven by profit. It's driven by greed. The people who invent it may be really into the technical wonders and miracles of the whole thing, but it's not being done and rolled out in huge numbers for the benefit of everybody. It's being done for profit of the few. And there's damage being done society and us along the way. And we need to be aware of it. We need to push back. And I would say that the best way to push back is not to use it. So you'll notice, for example, you can see all the flaws because I don't believe in filtering out what I look like. Sorry, I know you're all crying about that, but why? Who am I fooling, right? I don't believe in making AI covers for my videos. I don't know what to call them. Fake pictures. I don't like them. They never look like who they're supposed to look like. They're creepy because they look a little like the people, but not really. I find them oddly disturbing. But I don't like the falseness of it. I'd rather be transparent. It's a fun toy right now. Not going to be fun in the long run when we're all sitting around with no job and no way to pay the AI algorithms in the Walmart for food. Just saying. So on that happy note, thank you for watching. I so appreciate it. And spend some time reading a book, write a letter, keep a journal, go for a walk. Cover your face when you're on your walk. Okay, that's it. Slog of oil. Sláinte.